What's up? Welcome back to Nowstalgia. Dave here with a review of It Was Just an Accident, the new thriller film from Jafar Panahi. Panahi, one of the most celebrated Iranian filmmakers. This film winning the Palme d'Or earlier this year and is now the French submission for Best International Feature Film at the Oscars this cycle. Panahi, despite his critical attention, his status as an artisan in Iran, he has come under continued fire and oppression by the regime back home, having been imprisoned multiple times, having to film It Was Just an Accident in secret, just like he has with previous films. And as a result, this film is being submitted to the Oscars via France. If that sounds familiar, it's because we just talked about this very thing last year with The Seed of a Sacred Fig, directed by Mohammad Russulov. That film was submitted by Germany and did get Oscar nominated. Given It Was Just an Accident won the Palme d'Or, has been critically acclaimed, it seems very, very likely that this film will in turn be nominated at the Oscars, but again, for France. A film that is talking about the challenges of being an Iranian person in contemporary times in terms of your relationship to an oppressive government that rules over you with an authoritarian fist. It makes sense that this film had to be filmed secretly. The cast is almost largely non-professional actors with just a few exceptions. While there has been a slight, unclenching of the fist from the Iranian regime in terms of how they're treating art these days, it's still a really tenuous thing, especially with someone with such a troubled history with the regime like Panahi. So nonetheless, the film has been released here in the States, and again, the reception has been really strong. And that's because Jafar Panahi's It Was Just an Accident is an excellent thriller film, specifically a moral thriller. When a previously imprisoned Iranian citizen thinks he's encountered his previous oppressor in prison, he decides to do something about it, to enact his revenge, to get that payback. But as doubt begins to creep in, as second thoughts take hold, this man has to enlist other people he knows were also previously imprisoned and ask them if they think this is in fact the correct person. Because of course, nobody wants to kill an innocent man. And from there, it's a lot of really charged conversations, people having different points of views in terms of how they want to handle the situation, what they do and don't want to address. And it really does make you think, especially as the movie begins to pick up pace and really swell to a very impactful climax at its conclusion. The moral and ethical questions are certainly very clear, but the film is also quite intelligently critical of the current climate it's dramatizing. The film did take a little while for me to pick up. I thought a lot of the back and forth early on with some of the characters was a little slow, but once it really picked up pace, it was really gripping. And again, I think that climax is excellent. Again, hats off to this cast, because almost the entirety of the cast are non-actors, right? Our lead, our effective lead, it really becomes an ensemble piece quickly. Vahid Mobaseri plays the character of Vahid, and this is the guy who by chance thinks he's encountered his previous oppressor because he recognizes without a shadow of a doubt the sound of his oppressor's prosthetic leg and the squeaks it makes. And when he was in prison, blindfolded and hung up and could not see anything, his auditory senses were all he had to grip with reality. He could never forget that sound. This concept, this premise, based on Jafar Panahi's previous, I believe his first imprisonment, decades ago, back home in Iran. And as more characters come to be, it is funny. And I think for me watching it, you're like, oh my God, you're making so many mistakes. They're going to get you. They're going to catch you guys. Like, you're watching all this back and forth, all this risky behavior as they have eventually a bound and gagged unconscious man who happens to be a servant of the regime in a wood chest in the back of the nondescript van, and they're literally driving around Tehran trying to make decisions and ask other people for help and whatnot. And once that ensemble keeps growing and we encounter the character of Hamid, who has such a rage, such a passion, such a desire to enact that vengeance, even if everyone else is beginning to have their doubts and their misgivings about it, he challenges them for their inaction, questioning their courage and their true desire for change and things like that. And I think he expresses, a lot of important thoughts in a really aggressive and frank way. And once his character begins to kind of chastise the rest of the group for how they're approaching things, and the group is starting to splinter in terms of the next steps they want to take, I think that's where the movie like really picked up for me. That being said, there is a key contrivance in the film that I did think was a bit silly. It's certainly a bit unrealistic, but it plays directly into the moral thriller aspect of it all, the ethical questions of how the movie's going. They foolishly answer their prisoner's phone, and they find out that no, it's not the regime trying to find him. It's in fact their prisoner's young daughter pleading for help because her mom is unconscious on the floor at home. And of course, her dad, unknown to her, is tied up in a van somewhere. And then they realize that the mom, the wife, is pregnant, about to give birth, and they don't want to be responsible in some way for that death, those two deaths perhaps, right? So they end up actually taking her, both of them, the child as well, to the hospital and like paying money and making sure all that happens to have a successful birth for the child of their previous oppressor. And all of that, resolved in a neat enough way. And then I liked how it came back around though at the end, because the way the end of the movie was a confrontation where we finally learn if the person they tied up was in fact the person they thought he was or not. After all his protestations about being freed, is he in fact who he doesn't say he is, but they think he is, right? And I won't spoil how that goes, but I think that conversation and what they're talking about, and some of the propaganda that's put upon them in terms of innocence versus guilty, and well, if you send an innocent person to death, at least they got into heaven, and the fallacy of using that as justification. I really liked how all that went. That being said, I did think the hospital stuff, the wife giving birth stuff was a little convenient, a little neat. But that ending, which takes place in largely darkness at night, really just great acting. The person who's tied up is, I think, the one like real like film actor in the cast. But everyone involved in the scene, I think, does a really great job. And the movie is effective at making you think and grapple with these tough ethical choices, these gray areas, these extra legal type things, taking matters into your own hands. And also is very frank about its criticism of how normal, average working citizens are treated in the Iranian regime from an oppressive authoritarian government. Again, a similar sentiment to how we felt about Russillov's The Seed of the Sacred Fig last year. It's a very different movie. That movie's certainly a lot more currently grounded in specific current events in the recent past in Iran, versus It Was Just an Accident is kind of more evergreen, modern times, modern life under the regime. Nonetheless, another powerful film that was very courageously made, given all the danger you face with this type of direct criticism of a government via art. So obviously, strong recommendation from me. I'm expecting it to be a Best International Feature Film nomination. Again, Seed of the Sacred Fig got through as a German nomination. France has a very strong track record at getting nominations in that category. I would not expect that to stop with this film. And it's going to be a strong field, of course. No Other Choice from South Korea. Park Chan-wook's film will be in the mix there. The Brazilian contingent will be sending The Secret Agent. We know how strong that voting body is as well. I'll be pulling for Dead to Rights from China, which I really liked as well. So it looks like a strong field, but it was just an accident on the fact of it won the Palme d'Or already from a celebrated international filmmaker. Seems like it will be a successful nomination. But yeah, let me know. What did you think if It Was Just an Accident? What did you like about the movie? Did you brush up against a minor contrivance like me? How'd you feel about it overall? Let me know. And for more movie reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time.